I'm Edwin Warfield, the publisher of Citybiz, and I'm honored today to interview Dr. Jim Minn, who is the CEO and founder of Cleerly. Welcome, Jim.
Thanks so much for having me, Edwin.
Cleerly is a cardiac care management system that combines image analysis and AI. Can you explain the technology?
Sure. So we leverage CT coronary angiograms. So CT coronary angiograms are non-invasive tests, very safe. They in a high quality center takes about 15 minutes to get all in and leave the facility. And what we realized since we started doing coronary CT angiography is that there were things that are the most important information and data within that scan were beyond the ability for a human to be able to extract it. And so we recognized that we needed to create tools that would allow us to really retain and not waste the data that we have about that patient's disease state. So Cleerly has developed a series of machine learned algorithms that process in parallel that do advanced analysis of this patient's coronary heart disease using the non-invasive CT scans.
And how does it result in personalized therapeutic solutions?
The Cleerly analysis is really aimed to try to help support physicians and patients standardized approach so that we can have personalized cardiology care. The historical ways that we've done it is really to try to leverage risk factors of disease, which are great for comparisons of populations. If I take 1 million people over here with high cholesterol and 1 million people over here with low cholesterol, these risk factors can differentiate which groups are at higher risk. But if I ask you within any individual, within each one of these million patient groups, to pinpoint the specific individual who's at risk of a heart attack, it's difficult to do so with the risk factors of disease. So our shift has really focused on personalizing precision heart care at the individual level to identify an individual's amount of disease, type of disease, and then to help support doctors with tools that help visualize that data in order to be actionable and to be able to track that disease over time to prove the efficacy of the therapies that we're using.
So let's go back a decade when you were in New York and you had started the Heart Health Program, which was a collaboration with the Dalio Institute of Cardiovascular Imaging and the Sandy Weil Cornell Medicine. Tell us about that period of your career and how that sort of resulted in where you are today with the launch of Cleerly.
Yeah, you asked that. Like in 2012, I spent the first 7 or 8 years of my career doing a lot of critical care medicine. So it was a lot of patients who have presented with heart attacks or with acute chest pain. And I took care of a patient who was very young, in his mid 30s, and came in with a massive heart attack and thought, gosh, I'm on the wrong side of this curve. I need to be on the side of the curve that prevents the disease rather than treats the events after the catastrophic event has already occurred. So in 2013, as you noted, we started a program at Cornell Medical College and New York Presbyterian Hospital called Heart Health. It was a prevention program that I think to this day was like no other. We took a very, very different approach towards cardiovascular disease prevention, where we said, look, like all of the things that we're using, whether it's cholesterol levels or blood pressure or stress tests, they don't actually measure heart disease. They're all indirect markers of the disease. And I'll give you an absurd example. We looked around at the most successful preventive care paradigms, and we found them all in cancer mortality reduction. And so whether you use a mammogram to personalize, breast cancer prevention, or whether you use colonoscopy or a lung CT scan, none of those things actually that we find to be commonplace now were recommended 20 years ago. When I trained as an internal medicine resident, we were recommending monthly breast exams for women, for checking blood in the stool, for doing chest x-rays. They were all supplanted by advanced non-invasive imaging. So by looking at those successful paradigms, we tried to emulate that within our heart health program. And the absurd analogy that I'll give is like if somebody, if a woman went to a doctor and said, okay, I'm worried about breast cancer, and they looked for lymph nodes or they looked for indirect markers, but they said, look, I'm never going to actually look for breast cancer itself. there's no patient in the world who would go to that breast cancer doctor. So we said, well, why don't we try to establish that type of paradigm where we actually measure heart disease or the atherosclerosis that builds up within the walls of the arteries. And we'll use that to assess whether or not somebody has heart disease, how risky that heart disease is, the type of heart disease, and then whether or not the therapies are working to actually stop the progression of that disease. It's funny, we had 4 faculty members in that program. Fast forward 7 years, and I asked the director of that program, like, how many heart attacks did we see or observe over that time? And she's like, not a single one. And I said, wow, we really might be onto something here. But what we were doing at Cornell was extremely time intensive, very manual. We had the extreme fortune to be supported by a very, very generous philanthropist. So we had literally a team of 15 to 20 CT technologists just analyzing the CT scans all day long. And we realized that this level of care will never transcend past the Cornell walls or the New York Presbyterian walls if we don't somehow automate this and standardize a comprehensive care pathway for personalized prevention. So that was really the nidus of where Cleerly came about.
And let's take it back to 80,000 feet and really share some data. As I was doing my research on your company, yeah, the statistics are 50% of people who suffer a heart attack will do so without experiencing any symptoms. I mean, that's sort of a mind-boggling statistic. Can you share some statistics related to the problem you're trying to solve?
Yeah, I'll give you a slew of statistics that are extremely alarming. So number one cause of death is heart attacks globally. And it's going back up. After decades of decline, since 2017, it started to creep back up despite blockbuster therapies that we have that can prevent heart attacks. Average age of sudden coronary death due to a fatal heart attack is 50. That means half of these people are in their 40s. So it's not just the elderly disease; it's a disease that affects people across. If you think about what is the magnitude of this public health epidemic, somebody will die of cardiovascular disease every 1.7 seconds. If you want to put that into sort of frame of mind, I'll give you 2 additional statistics. There are 40% more cardiovascular deaths each year than from all cancers combined. And so that includes breast cancer, lung cancer, prostate cancer, colon cancer. And if that doesn't sort of open your eyes to the magnitude of this problem, there were 2-fold more cardiovascular deaths in 2020 than deaths from COVID-19. It's a true public health epidemic. It is the number 1 public health epidemic in this world. And we want to try to solve this problem by helping doctors identify patients earlier and really helping support guiding the treatment so that we can see that we can stop the formation of new plaque and that we can really stabilize the disease that is there.
Can you share your journey from being an academic to the founding of Cleerly, that transition? Hey, you've been an academic for a period of your life, and then all of a sudden, hey, I'm going to start this company. Walk us through that period and the actual formation and founding of Cleerly.
Yeah. So thanks for asking that question. Like it was definitely a stark transition. It wasn't. It was very different worlds. Like as you pointed out, like my identity was as a physician scientist to really take care of patients, to do large scale clinical trials, to help understand the clinical outcomes associated with what we were doing, to understand new vascular biology concepts that would really move the needle forward on how to effectively treat patients. So that was who I was. As I transitioned into industry full time, there was a transition period where we had started Cleerly, and I was still trying to maintain both hats to some extent, and realized I can't do that. And I jumped out into the company full time because what I wanted to do was 2 goals that I felt like I couldn't achieve in academics. One was to deliver products and services that could touch human beings in a positive way globally, rather than just at Cornell. And 2, really to try to fulfill the scientific evidence so that we could really get this technology to all patients at risk. And so what we're trying to do is really espouse this notion that given, as you pointed out, that more than 50% of people who will die of a heart attack or suffer a heart attack will actually experience no antecedent symptoms before their event. I think the biggest change, just personally, is that I found academic medicine to be more of it was like singles tennis, right? Like it was an individual sport, and you worked hard, and the harder you worked, that's what you did. You took care of patients, you did the research, things like that. In contrast, I feel like in our company, it's very much like team hockey, right? Where it's this orchestra of many different people with extremely different skill sets, and they are all sort of singing and going down that rink in unison, even anticipating, knowing what's going to happen 5 seconds later and where that person's going to be. So this constant cross-functional collaboration and communication was something that was new-ish to me. I mean, there's certainly a degree of that in academics, but not like it is at Cleerly, where we're truly united as one team.
Let's bring your story up to today. Can you provide a snapshot of where Cleerly is today, in terms of employees, um, traction, any sort of key metrics, and an overview of where you are?
Sure, absolutely. Like, so we, right now, we are a company that is pretty decentralized. We have footprints. Those footprints include New York City, Denver, Colorado, and then we have a small subsidiary in Europe, in Portugal. Otherwise, we're generally decentralized, like I think many tech-enabled companies are. We're currently approximately 100 employees and growing. We likely will probably double the team in the next 18 months or so. So we're definitely in expansion mode. And the expansion mode is really around several verticals. One of them is the commercial growth. And so we're experiencing very, very significant commercial growth. So we'll expand that team. The second vertical is really in continuing product innovation and delivering best in class, new innovative products that have not yet been introduced to the field of cardiology today. And then the third is really around what we've always stood for, which was the evidence generation. So, the company was built on science and, an array of clinical trials that we had done over the course of the past 15 years. We will always stand for science. Like we used to have a saying at Cornell that if it's a study worth doing, it's a study worth doing in a prospective multi-center fashion. And so we will always provide the highest quality scientific evidence to support the use of our products and services.
And who are the other key members of your team?
Yeah, we have like this fortune of having this absolutely superstar cast. And so, we've got folks that just excelled so much in their respective fields. Like, I mean, the entire management team, I would say about 2/3 of us have spent the majority of our lives and our careers in cardiovascular or related disorders. So we feel like we have this domain expertise to understand what to make, why we're making it, and who we're making it for, to provide those best in class solutions. And about 2/3 of our management team have held leadership positions at these hyper growth, multi-billion-dollar health tech startups. So we feel like we've balanced that domain expertise with a muscle memory of how to build a company without breaking it. As you know, Edwin, it's not easy to build a company, and there's many, many holes that you can step in along the way. And I think having that muscle memory really adds to it. But our management team has come from an array of successful startups before. Some of them are serial entrepreneurs. Others are just been dedicated to cardiovascular their whole lives. And so I think it's a great balance amongst the team.
And so, what is the status of the clinical trials?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, I mean, I think right now we're probably the biggest issue that we're facing is like, should we decrease the number of studies that we're doing? We have at least a dozen multi-center clinical trials either in process right now, completed, or in preparation. Some of them very large, some of them very small. Like the smallest one, I think, was probably around 200 patients. The largest one will be a large international registry that will enroll up to 200,000 patients. And then we've got other sort of multi-thousand patient trials that are embedded within that. I think all told, we probably have more than 70 active research projects, and they really go to trying to support the clinical community in one, demonstrating the diagnostic performance and diagnostic validation studies to show, that compared to every conceivable gold standard, our software platform matches up. I think the second sort of type of research that we do is clinical utility research. By that, I mean like the things that we're measuring have significant import to that patient's outcome. So prognostic studies, risk stratification, discrimination of who's going to have an event and who's not. And then the third sort of is around sort of the health economics of it. Like we can't break the bank. And what we've demonstrated in a number of studies is that by utilizing the Cleerly platform, doctors can provide better care and while reducing the total costs of care. So really bending the cost curve downwards. And then we've also have a number of studies that we're pursuing that are what we call level 1 studies. And those level 1 studies are designed to influence professional societal guidelines and policy statements around where we can really expand the use of Cleerly into other at-risk markets or at-risk patient populations that could really benefit from early diagnosis and prevention.
So you had a very exciting July. You closed on $223 million of funding for your Series C that was led by our Baltimore firm of T. Rowe Price. Tell us about that funding and how you're going to use the funds moving forward.
Yeah, you're right. It was a very exciting July for our company. Like, if I know the math correctly, that financing round totaled more than eightfold the amount of capital that the entire company has used in its entire history. So it's a lot more capital than we were used to. We were blessed, to be honest, and very fortunate to meet the likes of T. Rowe Price as well as Fidelity Investments, both who co-led the round. The reason I say that we were very blessed and fortunate is that they shared the vision. The vision, they see that the number one public health epidemic, we're not making a dent into this, and they saw that we could meaningfully impact the lives of millions or billions of people. And they supported the company in its vision to do exactly what I enumerated, to really expand that commercial growth, to really continue product innovation and releasing brand new products that the field has never seen. And then they were also very supportive of the evidence generation to prove and influence the policy statements and professional societal guidelines. Fortunately, in addition to T. Rowe Price and to Fidelity Investments, we also took in investments within the syndicate from other long game, very high value investors such as Sands Capital, as well as some tech-enabled investors such as Briar Capital and Peter Thiel's fund. And then we also focused on some health systems, as well as some pharmaceutical companies that really could see the value of precision heart care or delivering personalized cardiology care. So the round came together quite well. It was a big sigh of relief. And now we took about a day off, and now it's time to get back to work and get back to the business of company building.
So I could stay. I could interview you probably for a couple more hours. Is there any questions that I haven't asked? Is any part of your personal story, your personal journey, or the Cleerly story that you'd like to share with us?
Now, I think maybe just a reminder to everybody to ask the question of, could Cleerly touch my life? And I think everybody knows somebody who went out for a run and never came back, or who went to sleep and who never woke up, who was feeling fine one day and who was dead the next day. And, tragically, that's the typical presentation of a heart attack, is to feel nothing and then to suddenly be suffering a catastrophic event. So rather than my own personal life, I just ask your listeners, think about your lives and how this could touch your life. And I think that if we're honest with each other, early diagnosis and prevention is the way to go. Currently, we're spending about half of our healthcare dollars on the last 6 months of life. I mean, think about if we allocated that effort towards prevention rather than treating end-stage disease, I think we'd be a healthier, happier society. And so we're looking forward to trying to at least contribute somewhat to that goal.
Well, I've done thousands of interviews, but probably this is the most important interview to me. That's in 2014. I had a major stroke. That was not, I had no idea. I was blindsided. And then in 2021, I had an aorta bypass. Again, I had no premonition was going on. Luckily, I called my cardiologist at Hopkins. He said, "Edwin, go to Hopkins." And then I had a mini stroke last year, so it was hard for me not to interject as you were telling me your story. But it's an important story, and I wish you best of luck.
Thanks so much, Edwin. I'm glad that like you're healthy now. I'm sorry that you had to experience all of that, but I thank you for sharing that story because ironically, like it's the typical presentation, right? Where you feel fine one day and then the next day, like the world is crashing in on you, and we can prevent that. Like, I mean, if you do, like in our own microcosm at Cornell, when we were doing this approach, we saw that we could make a real effort to reduce heart attack rates, and the treatments of heart attacks are, prevention is medical therapy and lifestyle. That also treats the stroke risk as well. So there's a lot of great things that we can do. We just need to get to the diagnosis early. I'll end with this. Like, if you look at every study that says, okay, what is the biggest predictor of somebody to be a rapid progressor of disease and get worse over the near and intermediate and long term? It's always the baseline amount of disease. And so once you have a lot of disease, whether you're asymptomatic or not, the horse is out of the barn at that point. It's hard to control that process. Whereas if you can get the disease at its very early state, you can make very substantial changes. And what we want to do is, like, we want to achieve just silence, where suddenly we're not hearing about heart attacks, we're not hearing about strokes, because we got to somebody when they're asymptomatic, feeling healthy, and kept them healthy. And that's the goal of really early diagnosis and treatment. So we'd like to create best-in-class tools to help support doctors and patients with that goal. And hopefully we can, and we can make good progress over the course of the next several years.
Well, I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks so much, Edwin. Thanks so much for having me on your podcast today. I really appreciate it.